This video dives deep into the explosive criminal life of Josiah Fingers Rabotapi, a legendary outlaw from Soweto, infamous for his ruthless string of armed bank robberies, violent cash-in-transit heists, and jaw-dropping 3 prison escapes during the chaotic 90s. Linked to 17 hits and over 40 high-stakes robberies, Fingers carved his name into the criminal underworld with precision, fearlessness, and a hunger for more. After his triple escape streak, he and Colin Chauke became South Africa's most wanted men, hunted by a special police task force around the clock. But Fingers' story didn't just end in handcuffs, it ended in blood. Laid down by police under highly suspicious circumstances, many believe his death was not justice but an execution. The millions he was suspected of hiding, never found. Now in this episode, we unravel the rise and fall of a legendary Soweto hustler who outplayed the system, outgunned the law, and left behind a legacy of violence, mystery, and unanswered questions. This is a story of Josiah Fingers Rabotapi and his tragic, controversial end. With the unbanning of political organizations in 1990 and the return of exiled comrades, a cloud of uncertainty loomed over the future of the African National Congress's armed wing, Umkhonto weSizwe, the MK. No one really knew what to do with them. The once feared liberation fighters were sidelined, put on ice so to speak, left lingering in the margins of a society now focused on reconciliation. Yet beneath the surface, some warned that the unintegrated MK soldiers could become a ticking time bomb for post-apartheid South Africa, and the warning proved prophetic. On the 9th of March 1998, during an ANC media briefing, the media was rocked by a revelation. Some former MK soldiers openly admitted to orchestrating high-stakes cash heists, stealing millions of rands. One soldier casually detailed their method, befriending low-ranking security guards within the security companies to gain insider access. But the MK wasn't the only players in this shadow war. The Azanian People's Liberation Army, APLA, the military wing of the Pan-Africanist Congress, the PAC, had its own underworld operation. Now in the early 90s, as the PAC pushed its strategy of a protracted people's war, APLA guerrillas were infiltrated into the country to wage a guerrilla warfare. Alongside that, the APLA High Command authorized the creation of a reposition unit, a network of armed gangster comrades that carried out robberies to acquire funds, weapons, and vehicles necessary for the struggle. Now, unlike the ANC, the PAC lacked wealthy international donors, so they turned to a barrel of a gun to bankroll their revolution. But this wasn't just the work of disillusioned freedom fighters. As the dust of apartheid settled, hardened criminals stepped into the scene, many armed to the teeth, equipped with insider knowledge of cash flows and security systems. Now, in this murky space between revolutionary ideals and cold criminal enterprise, lines were blurred. Now, in the early days of the new South Africa, some gangsters, more specifically robbers and former comrades, often worked side by side. They weren't robbing local communities, they were hitting banks, armored cash vans, and white-owned businesses. Now, with mutual interest, they shared intelligence, traded weapons, and helped each other carry out meticulously planned heists. Now, the war for liberation may have ended, but a new war, covert, calculated, and fueled by cash, had just begun. There was a crew of hardened hustlers from Soweto, known for pulling off some of the most daring and sophisticated heists. You see, these weren't just petty criminals, they were cream of the crop. Experts at robbing banks, robbing cash vans, hitting depots, and cleaning out jewelry stores, snatching diamonds like scenes straight out of a movie. Their names were whispered with a mix of fear and respect. Vusi Maduna, Peter Mukwena, also known as the Seho Muhwate, Peter Nkosi, Nwabisi John Ngana, Clement Modise, Themba Radebe, Vunchi Moti, and Josiah Rabotapi, to name a few. Most were born and bred in Soweto, and the township knew them very well. Always rolling deep in BMWs, they were known for that. Preferably the 535s and the 735s. Their rides were as iconic as their crimes. Most of them started out stealing cars, but as they got sharper, bolder, and more connected, they graduated to high-stakes armed robberies. One of their most notable jobs happened in December of 1991, an armed robbery at the First National Bank in Dube, Soweto. Now the score was R500,000 cash. Now this was done by Funjimoti, Brian, and Tembaradebe. These guys were armed AKs, hammers, getaway vehicles, and they executed the operation with military precision. No casualties, just cold efficiency. Now not long after that job, a bank employee quit their job and was never seen again at the branch. And that was Josiah Rabotapi. Born and raised in Soweto, Fingers had once worked at the FNB Bank in Dube, Soweto. But after that robbery, Fingers left the job. He flipped the script, joining the very crew that had robbed that bank. Leveraging his insider knowledge, he became instrumental in bank jobs, then moved up to targeting armored cash vans. Now early in his criminal career, he was arrested for robbery, but when he got out, he didn't slow down. He leveled up. Fingers and his crew hit so many scores, security companies were forced to upgrade, ditching their old Toyota taxi panel vans fitted with safes and switching to small armored trucks just to keep up with the threat they were posed with. Now his path into crime likely began with ambition, financial hunger, and the deep knowledge of how the banking system worked. But it didn't end there. His environment, his street smarts, and his ties to Soweto's growing criminal underworld propelled him fast through the ranks of South Africa's most dangerous robbers. By the time the authorities started catching on, it was already too late. Fingers and his crew had already changed the game. In 1994, Fingers and his fellow hustlers set their sights on a high-stakes robbery in Rosebank, a slick operation that was meant to go off like clockwork. But something went wrong. The job spiraled into chaos. Bullets flew and 3 people were laid down in a brutal shootout with the police. Now in the crossfire, Fingers was hit. A bullet tore through his hand, taking a large part of his fingers with it. Still, the crew escaped with millions. Now that was the moment when Josiah Rabotapi became Fingers. Back at the crime scene, police recovered the severed digits or part of his hand. Forensics ran the prints, and that's when the past came crashing down. Finger by finger, they linked him to a string of previous heists. The net closed in and he was arrested and charged with armed robbery and attempted murder. But prison couldn't stop him. While serving a 20-year sentence at Johannesburg prison, Rabotapi staged a daring escape with his accomplice, Gordon Hlangulela. Though he was recaptured, it didn't stop him. He escaped again and again. By 1997, Fingers had broken out of custody 3 times in 1 year, each time slipping through the system like smoke. That's when it became official. Fingers and Colin Chauke were declared South Africa's most wanted robbers. Now a specialized police unit was formed, assigned to track just these 2 guys day and night until they arrested them. But Fingers didn't lie low. He kept robbing and hitting scores harder and faster. Millions in cash disappeared, stashed in hidden locations. Fingers stashed some of the money in deposit boxes in banks. Other cash was stashed in stash houses, piled high to the ceiling, giving him fast access to money while he's constantly on the run. Now, despite being a fugitive, some say Fingers was living a normal life. He even had a penthouse or a stash house in Sandton, a lifestyle far from the shadows you'd expect from somebody who's on the run. On the 17th of December 1997, in Marble Wall in Mpumalanga, Fingers and his crew launched one of the most violent heists in South Africa. Armed with AKs, hammers, grenades, they ambushed an SPV cash van, using a strong vehicle to force it off the road. Now, in that mayhem, 6 security guards were laid down. The crew made off with 10 million rands in cold hard cash. They even had spiked chain in their arsenal, though it wasn't needed for that operation they executed. But the message was clear. Fingers wasn't running. He was still in the game and more dangerous than ever. Fingers was finally caught after being lured to a house in Dobsonville by police. It was quite a setup. No high-speed chase, no shootouts, just a door, a trap, and a man who had outsmarted the system for years. When they cuffed him, it seemed like the war was over, but the real story was just beginning. After his arrest, Fingers volunteered information to the cops. He claimed that there was 50,000 rands in cash and an AK stashed at one of his hideouts. This was in Sandton. But let's be real, he was connected to jobs that netted around 82 million rands. There's no way it was just 50,000 rands in that flat. It's more likely the police played it down or helped themselves to the rest of it. At the flat, Rabotapi handed over the keys and waited in the police vehicle while officers entered to inspect the place. Eventually, they brought him inside for a closer search. He complained about the pain from his cuffs, so they agreed to move his restrained hands from behind his back to the front. Now inside the bedroom, while 3 officers searched near the headboard, Rabotapi positioned at the foot of the bed. Allegedly, he reached into a sport bag, pulled out a hammer, and aimed at the police. The response was instant. Hail of bullets. He was shot in the chest and on the dome. Police claimed it was self-defense, but here's the thing. Generally, police are trained to fire 2 rounds per threat. Now, Fingers was hit 5 times. That alone cast a serious doubt. Now, to this day, it's unclear how many officers actually opened fire, and none of them are willing to say anything. They didn't want to incriminate themselves by talking. Now, shortly after that shooting, 2 of the officers who were actually involved, they retired. Meanwhile, not a single cent from Fingers' spree was ever recovered.